Hey, this is Jonathan from Epoch Paranormal, and as you know, I post quite a few videos that are related to electronic voice phenomena. So today, I'm really going to take some time to try and help you better hear EVP. So not only can you hear the EVP that I post on the YouTube channel, but you can also hear them when you're doing your own paranormal work. So what I have here is a session I recorded on the Sony 620, and as you can see here, it's in the solitary confinement wing of Mansfield Reformatory. I thought this would be a great example to use because before the actual session starts, I sort of have everybody say, hey, we're all just going to sit here and we're going to be quiet in solitary confinement. And what I found was this is a pretty good example of what I want to teach about hearing EVP. So what we're going to go over today as we try and hear EVP better, or at least establish a better baseline of our hearing, is the main focus. Number one is going to be ambient noise. We have to be able to focus on that ambient noise that we get from our digital recorder, or as I like to call it, the common noise, or the common denominator, so to speak. It's always going to be present in some way, depending on if you're quiet, if you're moving around, if you have a group of people, what have you, just the general environment that you're going to hear. Once we get a focus on that, we're going to see how we can hear inside the ambient noise. So once we've got comfortable with hearing that noise, we have to start listening for the differences. And in that case, we're listening for variations in sound. The noise is always going to give us something, and typically EVP piggybacks off that noise and transforms it, and that's when you're going to get the variations to sound. Once we begin to understand the variations of sound inside the ambient or common noise, we're going to see how do we distinguish it from just general noise that happens, or if we have a legitimate EVP. Once we find that, hey, we do have an EVP, we're going to determine what it says by looking at some of the voice characteristics, like the quality, pitch, the volume, the pause and rate. You'll hear me say a lot of times, inflection is important. Those are the things we're going to look at. And then once we find an EVP, we'll look at the cleanup process, just a very quick view of the cleanup process to try and filter out, one, your common ambient noise, to push that down a few decibels and bring up the distortion or the variations in that ambient noise to figure out what's going on with your EVP. Okay, so the first section we're going to look at, as you can see, I have a few tags down here because I was going through these old clips and seeing, hey, there's a lot of them I put on the shelf because I just don't think they're strong enough to put out there. So I was going through this one, and as you can see, I found some things as whispers in the silence. But here I want to get a focus on just what common noise sounds like. So what you're going to hear in this clip is just basically the background noise of the solitary confinement area that we're in. And this little portion right here I thought was the best example to show you. So all you're hearing is just the noise from the recorder. This is the ambient noise that it's recording. These older recorders, they pick up more sort of trash waves. Like a lot of newer recorders, they filter out all of this stuff. But this is the stuff you want. You want all of that garble because it's actual noise that's happening there. It's picking up these lower frequencies. It's picking up a pretty good band wave of frequencies. So let's listen again. And what you want to really do is get a grasp on all the noise that's going on. Sort of let yourself sink into it, come to understand what you're hearing. So inside of that, towards the beginning, you sort of hear a wavering sound. You hear just like pretty much white noise. It sounds very similar to white noise, or trying to think it one of those generated noises. That's what it sounds very similar to. That's what you're going to get for most recordings, depending on what your EVP etiquette is. You know, how controlled is your environment. Sometimes you really can't control an environment, but you can do your best to filter these things out. So when you listen to this, well, think about what you're hearing. It basically, you're just going to sound like white noise, and you have to start to figure out a way, once you get comfortable with that, to hear the variation. So what we'll do, what we're going to do is we'll start from here. We'll start from here because I picked this section out just so you can hear it. And we'll start from here, and I'll let you hear up to this first mark I have where I feel like there is a potential EVP there. So if you listen closely, you start to hear a break in your ambient noise. You start to hear some different levels of pitch in the noise. It starts to change. It gets either slightly deeper, and you hear some kind of cadence to it. So let's go ahead and listen again from this front part. So that common ambient noise, if you come over here, it starts to match pretty well with this. And we'll come back to here, and what we're going to do is we're going to ride through here and ride through here. So we'll ride through potential EVP1 and potential EVP2. And you'll really get to hear a shift in the ambient noise. So what we've done so far is we've identified what the traits are of our ambient / common noise. Then we've brought it over here to run with the session with our understanding of the ambient noise, and then we start to hear inside of the ambient noise. So we start, that focus on that noise starts to shift over, and we hear changes in the noise, different attributes of the noise that we believe sound like legitimate variations. So here, once we get to EVP1, we've identified the variations to the sound, or the ambient noise. Now from this point through EVP1 and EVP2, we're going to begin to distinguish, is there an EVP here? So let's just play these two. So you definitely begin to hear something here, and then you hear something back here. Now pay attention to things like this. Typically EVP follows like a sort of a voice pattern like you have over here, but it's far condensed. It sort of hangs out inside the ambient noise. So if we brought this up more, our EVP is sort of in this area. You see differences in the noise, but right here you get this big spike. Typically these are indicative of somebody moving something or something hitting the ground. These are typically man-made spikes. But let's go over here and start to focus on this. So we know within this range there are variations to the sound, and those variations to the sound seem to have some pause/rate of speech. They have different pitch. They have a different pitch than our ambient noise, and the actual quality of them sounds different than the ambient noise. It almost sounds like there's a voice in there. So at this point you can sort of begin to say, hey, there is an EVP in there because no one was talking, and it's at the rate, or excuse me, it's at sort of like the frequency level where a lot of EVPs occur. It's got a lot of qualities of an EVP. Now we have to determine, does it say anything? This is when we go into the cleanup or editing process. So typically what I do is I'll look at it. So we're going to listen to it. What do we need to clean up? So if you've seen any of my other videos on cleanups, what I typically do is I come here, I go to effects, I go to noise reduction, and I get a noise profile of the ambient noise, of the common noise. Once I have that, I take it and I apply it to the area where the EVP occurred. In this case, I don't think we need a ton, so we'll leave it at 6. We'll play it again, and then typically what we'll do is we'll amplify it. So, from what I'm hearing, I'm going to go, backtrack on that noise reduction, effect, noise reduction, take it to a 3, repeat, because I didn't like the way that it cut off some of the ends. Okay, so you hear something here, and then you hear something here. Just to keep it very simple, we'll do amplification next. So once I get to this point, let's go ahead and put a label on here. Once we're at this point, then we can really start tinkering. Alright, so we've done a few things to here, so let's listen to what we have now, so we don't spend all day on this one. So for this one, you definitely have somebody talking. Now, this is the part of this is the part about electronic voice phenomenon that makes things complicated, is that it's such a loose phenomenon in terms of what you get, that I've actually come to the point where I just ask for people to say, just for people to identify that there is something there that typically would not be there. But the difficult thing about electronic voice phenomenon is determining what it says. There have been studies done with parapsychologists and other paranormal teams and researchers that basically tell you there is no concrete understanding of what is said for a lot of these things. I might think this says something completely different than you. If you show it to 3, 4, 5, 20 other investigators, the study says there's about a 10 to 15% rate of agreement. And that's probably on like a class A or class B. In this situation, what I want you to really understand is that when you get to the point where you're trying to determine what an EVP says, it's a cleanup process. It's a understanding of to me, the main 3 factors that come out to be classification. Well, actually, 2. The quality of a sound and the volume. If you have those 2, you have a pretty strong case for something like a Class A EVP. In this situation, this is maybe a Class C. Maybe. I mean, depending on how you hear it, it might be a Class D to you. But in this situation, we've got a Class C EVP. We can hear pitch in the voice. We can hear a pause and rate of how he speaks. It looks like he's saying maybe 3 words. And then in terms of strength, it's there. It rises above the ambient noise and you hear something. What does it say? I'll give you my opinion. Now, it typically requires me to listen to it quite a few times. I hear S. Almost sounds like he says stay. And then maybe stay with me. Typically when I work with these things is 1 word at a time. I'll listen to the first word multiple times. And the pitch is stay with me, stay with me. So I would probably put that one out there, stay with me. Now, if I put on a different set of headphones, it might sound different, and it might sound different to you. But what I wanted to get across here is these major factors in understanding and hearing EVP better. Understanding and focus on ambient noise, hearing inside the ambient noise to determine variations to sound. Once you determine variations to sound, distinguishing that it is an EVP and determining what it says through understanding of quality, pitch, volume, pulse rate, characteristics of speech. Next, I'll show you guys a few examples of a different EVP. Alright, so for this next part, I'll let you hear another EVP I captured in solitary confinement at Mansfield Reformatory. The question I'm asking them is, how'd you talk to each other? If you see up here, I've got everything sort of laid out. I say the EVP occurs about the 8-second mark. And it said, I feel like it says we talked. So I'll let you listen to it. Remember, as you listen to this, once your ambient noise starts, which will be around here, start to focus on that and then listen for variations to sound and how the EVP presents those variations, and then you start to distinguish it. I'll play it a few times and we'll break that down. So let's start from the beginning.
How did you guys communicate to each other whenever there was said? Did you knock, or did you talk, did you sing?
Okay, so right here is where you get your first chunk of ambient noise. Down here you get another chunk of ambient noise because the EVP occurs about here. So it's hard to hear, but this is your ambient noise. Now, when you look at the full, this is the full context of the EVP. Question, then answer. Here is the actual audio sample of the EVP. So you're going to hear ambient noise, EVP occurs within the ambient noise, and then another response. So let's check it out. So, something I love about coming back to these EVP with different headphones, a new set of headphones, is they sound different to me. What I have above saying we talk, it doesn't sound like that really to me. Which is, again, why I go back to what you want to really focus on is that something occurs within the ambient noise that you can identify as an electronic voice phenomena. What it says, unless it's crystal clear, I'll show you some of those examples. Unless it's crystal clear, all we really need to do here is understand that something occurred. Cleaning it up, getting it to sound super clear might not always happen, but we know that we have someone here speaking. So go ahead and check this EVP out again. So, for me being in solitary confinement, looks like I was isolated, I get a response.
How did you guys communicate to each other whenever there was clear? Did you knock, or did you talk, did you sing?
Okay, so I'm going to show you a few more examples so we can sort of hammer home this understanding of ambient noise and variations to the noise to distinguish EVP. Okay, so in this example here, I am at the Dwight Barnes building, and this is part of our initial walk around before we actually did the event a few weeks later. And what you're going to hear is something, is how I mentioned earlier to you that your EVP session may not always be exactly what you want. It may not be a completely silent room. You may have people talking. So in the context of what's going on here is we're walking around, we're looking at different areas of the school where we can bring investigators. And we're down beneath like the stage or something like that. And we're looking at things and I say, oh, I really want this. Now what you're going to hear is a higher quality EVP, to be honest. I've never been able to exactly figure out exactly what it says, but this is what you want to hear in an EVP. It wasn't any of us there. So I'll let you hear everything in context first. If you see here, you can see that the EVP's been marked, so you know when it occurs.
Didn't she show us this picture? Mm-hmm. So backstage.
Ooh, I really want that. So this is the dressing room she's looking at.
So, in this situation, you have to ask yourself, well, what is the ambient noise that I need to focus on? Your ambient noise starts with people having a conversation. And then you hear the noise behind it. So let's look at this for a second at the ambient noise.
Didn't she show us this picture? Mm-hmm. So backstage.
Ooh, I really want.
So you even start here, which is background noise. Once the background noise occurs and the people start to talk, your focus is still primarily on the background noise. This human speech that occurs here is very easy to distinguish from the background noise. So you keep riding the background noise. And once the speech comes in, you listen normally, because technically this is still a variation of sound from the background noise. It's still there. That's what you're hearing. But we know who that is. It's identified. And then the EVP occurs.
Didn't she showed us this picture? So backstage.
Ooh, I really want that. Oh, this is the dressing room.
So you hear the EVP. It's not human speech. So we'll come directly over here and we'll just focus solely on the EVP.
Oh, this is the dressing.
Again.
Oh, this.
It's a very clear EVP. What it says, I'm not 100% certain. Typically, I have a rule: if I don't know what it says and it's clear, I reverse it. In this situation, I'm not sure, but I hear a woman. And she's clearly there. I mean, this is a very strong EVP. This building, I have another EVP from here. This building's on it, like 100%. They're intelligent too. So let's listen again. And even when you get here to this EVP, this first section that I didn't include in the full context, this is your ambient background noise that you're paying attention to. It's the same thing that occurred here. I mean, if you look at this noise and you look at this noise, their decibel range is about the same. You know, they sort of have a grid-like pattern. So let's listen to that and the EVP. Again. You understand? So since we're here, let's go ahead and reverse this bad boy and see what it says. I don't think I've ever reversed this one. So now that it's reversed, you're going to hear a jump bunch of garble from Gary first, and then you'll hear the EVP, and then you'll hear their ambient noise. And I don't think it says anything. None of that was intelligent to me. I couldn't make out anything it said. If you did, post it in the comments. But that's going to be... that's your EVP for this one. So let's look at it all one more time, and then we'll switch to the next example.
Didn't she showed us this picture? So backstage.
Ooh, I really want that. Oh, this is the dressing room. She's looking at.
Okay, let's move to the next example. Okay, so here's our next example. I will admit these last few that I'm going to show you are much better than the original. I wanted the original to be a little bit more difficult to hear. But this is another one from the school. Excuse me. And it's going to be pretty easy for you to hear. But before we start, something I want you to really start paying attention to is the actual wave pattern here that you're seeing. Typically, as you become more accustomed to understanding and differentiating between the ambient noise and distortions in the ambient noise, you'll visually begin to see that these things here are pretty easy for you to see. You can see ambient noise, speech, ambient noise, and then you start to see these as they trail off. All ambient noise, and you start to see speech patterns in the ambient noise here. So you start to see how these things are laid out. And you can sort of pinpoint where you think certain EVP may be. But don't let that fool you, because you still have to amplify. You still have to go through the audio and listen. You can't just spread the audio out and say, okay, there's there, and there, and there. No. Since EVP occur within the ambient noise, you have to expand the ambient noise and clean it up slightly to begin to see speech patterns inside the ambient noise. Sometimes you won't really see them at all. They match up very well with the ambient noise like you saw in the first one. And these, since these are clearer, higher quality EVP, it's more pronounced. And the lower ones, like, you know, C's or whatever the rating system is, they mix in a bit more. So let's go ahead and listen to this one. This one right here, was during our setup of the actual event that day, and it was in like the auditorium. So let's hear. Now remember, pay attention to your ambient noise and look for variations to the sound that you can distinguish as EVP.
Hello, Brad.
That's your EVP.
Hello, Brad.
So here's your EVP. Now, this has already been cleaned up. This has already gone through my process to make it sound clearer, to bring it up from the ambient noise. Now, if it did match with the ambient noise, what you might see is a reduction in amplification. Oops, wait. You might see a reduction in amplification, and it might look more like this. Now, this is what I was telling you about just a second ago. You just can't look at it and say, okay, this is what it is. It might appear very similar to the rest of the audio file, so you really can't see it. But once you clean it up and you amplify it, you begin to see the difference. And you can even go into do this more to even highlight more how this thing might occur once you clean it up. You know, now it looks pretty damn noticeable. So let's take a listen again. So in this situation, I have a pretty clear idea what it says to me. It's, how can they leave us like this? It's very clear. In the other one, it was a lower class EVP. So understanding what it says wasn't something that you could readily do, but you knew there was an EVP there. Here, you know there's an EVP, and you can make out the characteristics of the speech. And it says, how can they leave us like this? Interesting story is this high school had a lot of their students go off into the World War. I don't know if it was one or two, but they went to war. And a belief of mine is that sometimes parts of those spirits, they come back. They come back to where they're familiar, and I wonder about what's being said here. Are we experiencing some students who died over at war and their spirits came back to the school? And they think maybe a part of themselves is still over there at war, and they're wondering, how can they leave us like this? Are they saying, hey, we're at this school and they need to be passed over? If you work at Dwight L. Barnes High School and you're seeing this, please contact me. I'll bring in everybody that I can to pass those kids over. Okay. This next and last clip is from the Gill house. This is probably one of my favorite ones because it's pretty clear and it's pretty intelligent. I'll just let you listen to it. See, can you pick it out?
Because there was one where I felt like they put their sick, and like if somebody was sick, they put them in there.
That's why I said it felt like the guy was showing cold sleep down here.
Did you see it or hear it? So, this is another example of the EVPs there. But I mean, if you just eyeballed it here, you can't see it exactly. But it's there and you heard it. I hope you heard it. Because inside of a speech, every little section, there goes your ambient noise, ambient noise, ambient noise, ambient noise. Just because you see it just here doesn't mean it doesn't continue through the speech. Focus on your ambient noise. Distinguish variables in your ambient noise, audible variables in your ambient noise, and determine which ones are EVP. In this case, EVP is pretty clear to me.
so close that it felt like the guy was showing cold.
So let's listen again. So, little story. This is from the Gill house in the basement. We were there, and it was during a major snowstorm. And we brought all the teams in. I brought a bunch of mediums in. You can actually see this. I have a Gill house, a psychic medium experiment. This is when this occurred. I brought in about 3 or 4 psychic mediums. I ran them through the house all at different times. They weren't allowed to talk. And at the end, they shared all their findings with each other with the Gill house historical staff. This EVP was in the basement. Let's go ahead and amplify it. And let's hear it again. So what do you think this says? It says, why do you care? Again, this is another high rate EVP. I consider this to be a Class A EVP. I also consider it to be incredibly intelligent, which shows me that there is a conscious, non-physical intelligence there in the Gill house in the basement that can recall history, actively knows we are there and can see us, and speaks to a level and strength that we can pick up on the digital recorder. So let's listen again. So you even hear your ambient background common noise in there. That's all your EVPs are. So just to recap and review, hearing EVP is about understanding and knowing your ambient / background / common noise. This is the noise that will occur throughout your audio session. Once you hear inside that ambient noise and understand it, you will begin to hear variations to that sound. The ambient noise will be present, but there are variations there, which, if listened to closely enough, you can begin to distinguish if they're EVP or not. Understanding your background noise, understanding your environment and who's there, whether they're speaking or not, will help you begin to distinguish EVP within background noise. After that, determining what it says is just up to you. Whatever method you want to use to clean it up, that is up to you. So, if you've watched this, I know it's a long video. I'm going to start putting out more difficult EVP for you to hear. A lot of the stuff that I leave on the shelf, I'm going to start putting it out there for you. I'm not asking you to understand it, but I want you to be able to distinguish that there is an EVP there that occurs that should not be there. It's an electronic voice phenomenon. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. If you made it through this video, caffeine's a good thing. Give me a like, subscribe if you can, share it. And if you have any requests for me to make certain things, I love doing this stuff. I can't keep posting EVP videos. I am not an entertainment source. I do research this. I do read up on my parapsychology. I read up on physics and all of those things. And I'm not an entertainment person here. So let me know what you think. I appreciate you watching. Thank you. Hey, it's Jonathan with Epoch Paranormal. I really appreciate you watching these videos. If you'd like to support my channel further, please go down and hit that subscribe button for me. Thanks.